Thank you very much. We have very limited time, so in the interest of that, I will be rushing through what I have to say, hopefully leaving time for question and answer. All of us have been through a very, I have no doubt you will agree with me, a moving experience going through this exhibition. And we owe it to Vikas Kumar, who has taken us on this journey together. Since one of the questions he is himself interested in, and many of us are interested in, is that of language. So give me 1 or half a minute to make an inclusive gesture. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸಭಾದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತುಕತೆಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಆಂಗ್ಲ ಭಾಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗ್ತವೆ ಅಂತ ನಿಮಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತು, ನನಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತು. ಆದರೂ ಕನ್ನಡ ಭಾಷೆಯ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಸ್ನೇಹದ ಮತ್ತು ಆದರದ ಸ್ವಾಗತ. ನಿಮಗೆ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದರೂ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಬೇಕಾಗಿದ್ದರೆ ಖಂಡಿತ ಕೇಳ್ಬೋದು, ನಾವೆಲ್ಲ ಸಹಯೋಗ ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ. ಬಾಕಿ ಮಾತೆಲ್ಲ ಇನ್ನು ಮಿಕ್ಕಿದ ಮಾತು आंग्ल भाषेದಲ್ಲಿ. जहाँ भी ये जाए इसे इंक्लूसिव होना ज़रूरी है. तो इसलिए I want to talk about only 3 things. One I have already talked about. There's more to be said about language. In the walkthroughs yesterday and today, Vikas has been pointing out the importance of studying the language of the stamps and of the covers and the cancellation and so on. Other than that, the basic question that, two questions that Vikas's pioneering exhibition invites us to consider is, how is caste related to me, in my life? In this case, he is foregrounding it through the vehicle of stamps and the postal system. That is one primary question. The other primary question is, what could be done about the problem of caste when we think about it, the challenge of caste when we think about it in the context that he has set for us. So when we think about these questions, 2 kinds of considerations come to mind for me. One is because of my profession as a teacher and so on, you automatically start thinking of method and methodological things. So it's very important to note that the principal concept that is foregrounded here is the concept of the archive. And I think Vikas Kumar's exhibition reminds us that archive should be treated as a verb, not as a noun. It is a doing thing, it's a process. An archive doesn't exist ready-made beforehand, even if some building is called archive. So the process of creating an archive is a continuous and a contested process. And it inevitably involves exclusions, attritions, inclusions, both deliberate and not deliberate. So I invite you to think about that. There's a lot more to be said about this, but I invite you to think about that. I also invite you to think about the fact that there are at least 3, maybe many more, kinds of material that we have been introduced to in this exhibition. In the first part of the exhibition, you are introduced to material that is conveyed by the postal system, but that is not itself authored by the postal system. It's other people who are writing the things that we are talking about. Then the middle part of the exhibition is what the state is saying via its stamps and so on. And the last part of the exhibition is about what non-state people are saying. It's important to keep these distinctions in mind, as I'm sure Vikas agrees, as we think about this. And also we need to think, as he himself points out, about all archives, all attempts to speak about or create or write about history involve silences and absences. So we need to think about those as well. And finally, of course, there is no history without interpretation. And interpretation can be from many standpoints that need not be taken as a failing, but can also be a strength. I want to now talk about the other challenge that this exhibition poses before us, is to think about what can we do in the frame that Vikas has set for us to think about caste. Now, in the social sciences, we keep talking about how caste is a relational thing. It's almost formulaic to say that. And we don't really emphasize how difficult it is to actually think about something that is relational, because then it is not an object, it is not a thing, it is not an attribute. It always involves at least two dimensions or two sides, and you have to keep both these alive, so to speak, at the same time. And if you think of caste as a challenge of that sort, as a struggle, then how would we, are other worlds possible? Can we imagine a world other than the one that Vikas has shown us regarding this? So I want to show you just a few images. The biggest struggle that we can imagine, especially in the frame set by the postal system, is the national struggle. So I was thinking of images regarding the freedom struggle. As you know, is the subject of many, many stamps. So we are not going to get into that. But as a particular incident, I wanted to highlight Jallianwala Bagh as an atrocity. Now, as you're aware, the word atrocity has come in very different contexts in this exhibition as well. Here are stamps about an atrocity. This is the first stamp from the 50th anniversary, 69. It's a particularly, I think, beautiful image. One can say a lot about this, but I'm not going to spend time on that. This is the 75th anniversary. Rather more obvious kind of image, but in the present context, extremely relevant. Clearly, nobody in this room will have any doubt as to what those figures, who those figures stand for or what they stand for. This is the latest, the 100-year anniversary in 2019. I don't need to remark on the striking difference between the images in different contexts. What I really want to, so in other words, I'm offering you an example of how an atrocity, quote unquote, has been handled by the world of stamps, philately, the state, whatever, the whole, horizon that Vikas has set for us. If we think of this image, another image from Quit India. So the image conveying a struggle, conveying a fight against something. How would you translate that in the context of caste? Is the question, really. And here is the struggle against malaria, for example, and how it is represented. There is I presume, an Anopheles mosquito on the left side. There are various other images. Another example of a very different kind of struggle. Here is I believe it is one of the first in the social welfare, social reformers and freedom fighters series. And this is a very interesting set for me. I'm sure Vikas can say a lot more about all this. I know nothing really about philately. I invite your attention to these four figures. A. Vaidyanathan Iyer on the left side, top left side. Let me just show you this image. To me, a very striking image. He's there because he fought for temple entry. These are the two others, not necessarily related very much to caste, except that Punjabrao Deshmukh also fought for temple entry. But the other one, Yagnik, is more about Gujarat and entrepreneurship and so on, social reform in a more general sense than about caste. Punjabrao Deshmukh happens to be a Maratha. Yagnik is Nagar Brahmin. I don't need to tell you what caste Vaidyanathan Iyer belongs to. The only Dalit described as a Pariyan is P. Kakkan from Tamil Nadu, who was involved in the struggle against untouchability and for temple entry. was a minister for a long time in the Tamil Nadu government, and so on. A figure of the establishment. He became a figure of the establishment later, but the only Dalit figure amongst those four images there. And I want you to think, I'll leave you with this image, this set of images. Clearly, the suggestion is that something needs to be done about caste, that it's some kind of a contest. But think about these images and what they are conveying. And the last thought I want to leave you with is, imagine there was a competition to design stamps on caste atrocities in India. Pipra, Belchi, Chunduru, Karamchedu, Khairlanji, Gohana, we can go on and on, right? Suppose there was a series of stamps like this, like Jallianwala Bagh. How would you design it? Thank you.
Am I audible? Yeah. So thanks, Vikas, for having me over. It's been, like Professor Deshpande said, it's been a very moving and a very, like a huge learning experience for me as well, the way in which you have conceived the exhibition and the way you walked us through it. As I walked through and as I'm looking at the stamp, at the collection, and I was also here day before yesterday when Professor Gopal Guru spoke briefly. So I'm left with sort of 4 ideas that I took away from it, and I would like to share those ideas with you, and then perhaps we could have, conversations around those. 2 of those ideas were already, we spoke about it already the day before yesterday, but it I think bears reiteration. One is, of course, what Vikas said about the fact that as these stamps were released, and from 1966 Ambedkar comes into the imagery, there is a certain set of figures who are now entering the public space of conversation and discourse, which is important because now, till then possibly there are these sections of people who don't know who is a Phule, and they are saying, hello, who is this? Can we talk about her? So it's important that these images and these people are then coming into a non-official, non-academic, more general sort of discussion, which is one point. Second, the point we made earlier about the 2 parallel strands that one sees in the exhibition. One, of course, is the fact that there are these people and there are these subjects which are the subject matter of the stamps and the first day covers and the postcards and the inland letters. The slogans that are coming from the government, the state, which are talking of saying that untouchability is a crime, caste, let's get rid of caste, and so on and so forth. But the messaging and the communication that is happening in those postcards and covers and the stamps which are being used to convey those messages are around caste consolidation, right? So there are 2 parallel things happening at the same time. So you're still consolidating around caste, and there is not really an awareness that we are getting. And how does caste consolidation happen? It happens because I consolidate, but as Professor Deshpande says, there is another out there, and as I strengthen my position, I necessarily strengthen it by understanding or positioning myself as superior vis-a-vis someone else, right? So there is this whole movement happening, this sense of, say, the Jaina community or the Vaishya community coming together is also happening at the cost of creating others. So there is this parallel movement. On one side, the state and its stamps and all of that, which is saying, no more caste, no untouchability, blah, blah, blah. And the other side, socially, this doesn't seem to be that awareness. Nothing is happening. Then, of course, Ambedkar and so on come into the picture. Now, then that brings me to the third thing. What happens when public when we have this exercise of including such figures in philately, right? For me, it's what I feel is in many ways it's like public statuary, right? It is a way I feel, or rather let me say, it's a way I fear that we treat problematic personalities, right? So we create a statue of Ambedkar. So there is a statue of Ambedkar in every nook of certain small towns and cities. And the politician or the statesman comes and inaugurates that statue. Then he says, I'll come back every year on the anniversary and I will garland that statue. But with that, the problem is solved. We can all go back home. Now I have put your face on my stamp, and I will have that grand inaugural exhibition where 5 of us will stand on the stage, 10 of us will stand on the stage, and we will say that, look, I've put Ambedkar on a stamp, and everyone, look how committed I am to this question. But after that, that's it. All of us can pat ourselves quietly on the back and go back home, because we've done this sort of task. We've done it's like ticking a box, right? So for me, a worry about philately is whether the state therefore reduces its task to simply that of ticking a box, right? So that is something that I was thinking about when I was walking through myself. And so in the process, I worry whether this act of public memorializing of personalities also equates a certain kind of state forgetting. And I wonder if that is something that we could think about and talk about, right? And then the question which Vikas spoke of very briefly 2 days ago was, who is the stamp collector? And the stamp collector, we find that because of the limitations of philately, the limitations of philately as a hobby being expensive, time-consuming, and so on and so forth, invariably the stamp collector is an upper caste person. So therefore, when he went searching for archives, for material for this exhibition that he was putting up, he found that he couldn't access. Many collectors hadn't bothered to collect this particular aspect of stamps, right? The Ambedkars, the Phules, the Periyars. They hadn't collected it. It wasn't important enough for them to collect it. They weren't interested in the caste movement. So there is an inherent casteism in philately, which for me I found very interesting. The fact that it is inherent in the way you collect stamps itself. And that casteism, I thought, is something that we should talk about. And finally, I'll end by recalling what Roland Barthes said about myths, and when he said that myth, in a way, depoliticizes reality. So we create, I think, when we have stamps, and we do it periodically, and we have Ambedkar, and we are happy. And we are sort of pleased that Ambedkar is now being called, he's being given his honorific of doctor. We are happy that he's now being called Baba Saheb. We are happy that he's entering the mainstream in a certain kind of way. He is being depicted in the clothes that he wished to be depicted in always, etc., etc. But also in that same movement, we create a myth of Ambedkar, which then becomes enough for us. That myth is enough, and the myth essentially depoliticizes Ambedkar, and the myth becomes a convenient way for us to focus on the image of Ambedkar without really worrying about the history of Ambedkar or the horrible sort of horrific sort of life and experiences that led to Ambedkar, being where he finally was, where he finally reached. And the horrific experiences continue around the issue of caste in India. So does the state's action of putting these figures on stamp, does it contribute to a certain kind of myth making, and therefore does it flatten out the ways in which we interact with the issues that ostensibly these stamps are supposed to be relating to? Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Vikas, for re-inviting me to join the panel. I already spoke on Friday evening, and I raised some points In my talk, since Satish is there, I would like to address one question to him singularly, because he's a sociologist. I don't see any other sociologists in the hall. I made this point, and sorry for repetition, that the post as the facilitating system of communication is both constraining and enabling, whether handled by the Britishers or the freedom fighters. I was making this point, telegram has not only helped the Britishers to actually tighten its grip over the subject population, control the subject population, but telegram also played a very important role in consolidating caste. And I was making this point, and this point has to be repeatedly made. A Brahmin family sends a telegram to a Brahmin who has sneaked out and actually sailing towards London. He gets a telegram at Suez. You have violated the caste order norms. Come back immediately. Now the word, the time, immediately, urgency. I'm raising this point. Why telegram? Why not postcard? And I am arguing the case that caste and untouchability doesn't really wait too long for its own evolution or purification. Come back immediately. So, caste is something about maintaining the norms, maintaining the order meticulously, one, and violation has to be attempted urgently. And for that you require communication very urgently. Okay? Now, does purification require urgency attendance, or can it wait? Is there any reference that, I am polluted by an untouchable today, I can wait for 2 days? Does it happen? Will it happen? I want the answer on this. So telegram is actually doing that. I'm just decoding the message. So this is one query to a very sensitive sociologist. I'm not teasing you, but I just yeah. Point two, this all India is it's an oblique suggestion that though we are actually particular in terms of language, in terms of our location, geographical location, but our imagination actually is encompassing the eight. Now, from where do we get this confidence? All India, Akhil Bharatiya Maratha Section Mandal. Marathas, they must have gone to Peshawar during 1761. But that's it. But they are basically located only in a certain region. Why all India? So this imagining nation through your own particular thing. And what is the justification you can provide? And you can ask certain questions you can take help of Benedict Anderson. And then also I'm raising the point, and the important point you raised was this, and I don't think we have any good convincing answer to this. People imagine nation through their own location, their ideological formations, and their own inclinations. The Marathas, for example. Now, their internal organizing principle is basically very, very particular. Interest of the caste. How can this interest of the caste become automatically national? And post is helping them to actually display without any hindrance. And you just feel free to use postal services to speak about your own caste. You don't feel awkward about it at all. Should I be feeling embarrassed to write publicly that, please be proud of your own caste? What kind of state, what kind of country are we really living? Do you not have the same consciousness today? It may not be blatantly visible in the public sphere. It is, of course, sometimes. So let us not remain in this kind of a illusion or a kind of a hypocrisy. So this is one point I think we have to really address very frankly. The third point Satish has made, and I think we require more thinking about it. How do you define atrocity? What is the context of defining it? Who defines atrocity? Or who is in a privileged position to define atrocity? Other atrocities can be subsumed in the atrocity which has got a national importance. Can you really, if you really think in terms of Gandhi, Ambedkar, and human being as the center of your attention, can you really prioritize life? One is superior to other. And he mentioned atrocity cases. Everything can wait. Every other atrocity can wait. Who is making atrocities to wait? Who has got that power to make atrocities wait? And I am not suggesting at all you have to hierarchize atrocities. But we have to explain, interpret them. So you have to make a very nuanced, deep understanding of what is happening around you. There is no emotive attention involved in this. So this is other point I thought I'd make. And the point Vaishna is making is also very important, myth making. I mean, you need to, historians are also sitting here, you need to actually decode. The historical facts are already infused with deep meaning. And that meaning is historically intensified. For example, 1927 March Satyagraha stamp is there, and you very sensitively put that stamp. Ambedkar's image embossed on the struggle, people standing there for water in March 1927. 1977, you're struggling for water, and you are bringing out the stamp in honor of that struggle and Ambedkar in 1991. So this time span is 1927 to 1991. So the very meaning itself is intensified over a period of time. You still have a Dalit boy who was killed because he touched the pot in Rajasthan last year. So I think we should thank Vikas, and I've been thanking him for the last 3-4 years, that you wouldn't know this if he hadn't really done this exhibition. Our texts in sociology, political science, history, anthropology are all our different kind. But Vikas's experiment is opening up different ways of looking at caste and making sense of post, public institutions, state. I think this is a very educative exercise, and it has to be multiplied at different levels. I've been thanking BIC, but it has to go to the schools, colleges, universities, public bodies, outside the political parties, basically. Can we do it? I'm very happy that a lot of people today have come, and I'm really impressed by your presence and your involvement in this whole thing. I think I should stop here. Thank you so much.
So thanks everyone. Yes, thanks everyone for coming on a Sunday morning. I'm glad that so many people are interested in this, and I'm glad that you are not tired from the exit polls that you watched last night, and you still survived those exit polls and came here in the morning. So we'll now open up this session for Q&A, because we'd like to invite questions and comments and try to understand things from your perspective. I mean, so we'll circulate a mic in the audience, and you can put the questions to all of us, and we'll try to answer them as best as we can. I mean, a lot of these stamps or the conversations here are opening up debates for which we may not have immediate answers, but the fact that you come together here tells me that we have a desire and commitment to find answers. Eventually, we will certainly find answers. Please.
Hi, so I had a question. So, Vaishnavi, you had raised the point that are these stamps and statues actually just kind of a performative expression and a performative way of remembering Ambedkar and a way for the state to not get away with actually not doing anything that furthers the ideals that he believed in, right? So my question is, to what extent is it performative, and can stamps actually have some kind of impact? Because at the end of the day, if you're putting an image of Ambedkar in a stamp that, like, you know, is going to be circulated very widely and a lot of people are going to see, he did ultimately believe in a lot of things and people know what those things are. So yeah, that's my question, I guess. Like, to what extent is it doing something?
Yeah, actually, excellent question, and it brings me to what Vikas is trying to do, actually. So Vikas is what I see Vikas doing, which is very, very unique, is that he's taking stamps out of the zone of philately as a hobbyist exercise into, you know, philately as history, philately as archiving, right? Now, at that point, I think when we reach that kind of way of engaging with stamps, I think that's where it will become crucial, because it will no longer be a flat exercise or a two-dimensional exercise. We'll start looking at the nuances, and we start looking at the context in which we were talking about Ambedkar, say, you know, in the context of the Mahar water crisis, etc., etc. So when we put those stories behind those stamps, I think that's when it'll become much more than just simply a symbolic symbolism, simply symbolism.
Thank you very much for the exhibition as well as for these very insightful remarks. I'm thinking of the stamp as already an antiquated object. I mean, you know, we don't really use the post as much as we might have in the past. So it's already to use the noun form of archive, it's already something that is frozen, as it were, in time. So it's all the more interesting that the last bunch, which you said is the high point of your exhibition, are all post 2020. The special, is it the first day cover? I'm sorry, am I mixing that up? What the other ones? The Andhra ones. Special covers. So it seems like a late entry into something that has already in some ways passed into a moment in history. And, you know, I'm just wondering about that. It's very interesting that you brought this together and you've made a very interesting narrative about it. But in some ways, we are really already talking about something that's in our past. And I wondered, you know, really would like to know what is the impetus that there was to produce these in the 2020s, 21, etc. The series, which is very fascinating, was tracing the journey of Ambedkar. So that is one question. The other is, of course, the very different ways in which caste is invoked as a consolidating identity in the early 20th century. The examples you give of the Jains and the Marwadis and the Brahmins and so on and so forth, as opposed to the way in which it is invoked, obviously, by not just the Harijan Seva Sangh, but also later Dalit organizations. There's quite a distinction, obviously, and you know, there is also a claim to public spaces. The mention was made about statues and so on and so forth. So it's like, again, I'm trying to ask this question about what's the appropriate kind of intervention in the space of the symbolic that is, you know, that is necessary, useful, and important, and very distinct from the consolidations that might have happened earlier. And Gopal, just in response to one thing which you said, the Akhil Bharatiya Veerasaiva Mahasabha in 1904, which was one of the earliest meetings that it had, actually passed the resolution saying that you will not lose caste if you cross the seas, as a concern that, to allow, as it were, the Lingayats to actually travel for education or other reasons. No, but it is interesting that, there is this consciousness of an all India presence, which is quite rightly, as you quite rightly remarked, a consequence of the arrival of the census. So there are all kinds of consciousnesses which I think you've portrayed in this exhibition, and one can talk a lot about that.
So, while it is true that the postal services are no longer the mainstay of communication, and this special covers which we have seen, most of them were issued in the last 10 years or so. We have to, but they are important for me for two reasons. Firstly, even if relatedly, they do give us a glimpse of the chasm between the way the New Delhi, Mumbai imagination of Ambedkar, has been dominant in the public space, and the way people actually remember, these public figures. So without these special covers, I would never have known about the stories of the small places. Right. So and the way they and the very endearing and earthy way in which they remember their icons. So I think it's important. Even belated, they tell us something important, and that's one thing. The second thing is that it happened so late because special covers needs a community of collectors who are actively engaged, who understand the art of making special covers, taking approvals, and then so on and so forth. So they have to be collectors who as a community believe that, and they also need to be officials who approve them, right? So we see that by 2010s, 20s, already we have more officers from the weaker sections and decision-making bodies. That will have an impact. The fact that there are more collectors, perhaps the first collectors group which calls itself Vishwakarma Collector Group comes out in 2017, right? So therefore, even if even if stamps are antiquated now, as you say, this tells me something. This gives me a glimpse of social mobility and the consequences or the impact of that, right? And these special covers are a reminder of what New Delhi has forgotten, what New Delhi cared not to look at, but New Delhi's attempt to iconicize Ambedkar meant to reduce him to a book, to a flag, to a parliament building, because this then, sanitizes Ambedkar. But the images which you see here, they, open up problems, right? So I think these special covers are important for that reason. Now, going back to your point about, on one hand, there's a caste consolidation happening, and on the other hand, the state has a parallel message. Does this have an impact? So, while it is true that, there's a Brahmin consolidation, Kshatriya, and all these consolidation, Maratha consolidation happening through the postal channels, and by the time the independence is achieved, each of these communities want their icons to be there, right? So the Brahmins are consolidated, now they are demanding a share. 1966, without any lobbying from the Dalit population, Ambedkar is featured on a stamp. Now, he was the first Dalit personality ever to feature on a stamp. And when the stamp is out, it's available on post offices. Now you see Ambedkar sitting next to Hazari Prasad Dwivedi, sitting next to Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Had the state under Indira Gandhi not made this token intervention, it was tokenism, but it was an intervention. Had they not made it, it would have been difficult to see Hazari Prasad Dwivedi next to Ambedkar, right? But now I go to a post office, I take, I've got a stamp, I need one more stamp, and the post person gives me this Ambedkar stamp. I just put it there. Now, when the stamp moves, now the stamp, first of all, the spatial taboo has been broken. The two cannot be shown side by side. B, now the stamp moves around. At least, we begin with the a priori assumption that not everybody is bigoted. So some new people will be exposed to this new. They'll ask, who is this person? So, what I did in the previous Ambedkar exhibition is also to show Ambedkar stamps being mailed from all over the country, right? Or Ambedkar stamps being sent from India to different countries. So people are exposed to new ideas, and you are hopeful. One is hopeful that some of them would also be moved by that. So caste, the Professor Guru mentioned caste consolidation happens, but at the same time, it's a double-edged sword. It sort of opens a space for newer kinds of questions and counter. So, for instance, you started using caste-based newsletters. Eventually, the Dalit communities also started publishing their own newsletters. The Oswald geography of India, imagined as a free trading space, is now, substituted by a geography, as I mentioned, of where people imagine a geography of atrocities and counter-assertion there, right? So the Dalit girl who faces atrocity, her parents, do not find space in the local media. They send a letter from Gujarat all the way to Punjab, and there the Dalit newsletter, which has very small circulation, front pages story, right? Now this, would put pressure on the mainstream media that you cannot ignore this, right? Just as social media these days plays the role, if you do not publish something, then there's something there. So these newsletters, these Dalit newsletters, they were kind of social media, right? They were the non-mainstream media, and the fact that these news is going from Gujarat to Jalandhar, and the newsletter is being posted across the country, a new solidarity is emerging, a new Bharat is emerging in this process. Now, this is also Akhil Bharatiya, right? This is also Akhil Bharatiya, but in the same container, in the same container marked by boundaries of India, a new India is being imagined. A new India where you want to question atrocities, and also build a community of people concerned about and prepared to contest it. So I think it's a more so we need to understand that any social change doesn't happen in a linear way. There'll be different impacts, and you have to see if you cannot have, and public spaces are like this. They will be put to use to all kinds of usages. It's up to us what we make of it. And that Dalit newspaper editor in Jalandhar 1970s, she chose to use the front page not to praise the government or something else, but to highlight the problems faced by a Dalit girl in some remote area. She had never seen her. She would never see her in her life, perhaps. But by front paging that atrocity, she made a statement. So I think, the public spaces are, there will be mainstream newspapers which would be foregrounding something else, but they would be put to this use. Even if belatedly they are put to use, it has an impact. So I guess I tried to answer partly.
Yeah, question.
Yeah. So, why did they make a myth out of Ambedkar? Like, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Why did they make a myth out of Ambedkar?
I just asked.
Myth out of Ambedkar. No.
And how does it affect the country?
See, your question is stumping me. So,
This one.
When you see, myths are sometimes organic. They rise by themselves, but sometimes myths are created in specific context, right? So you create a myth right now in the country today. What's one of the biggest myths we have, right? We have the myth of our Prime Minister, right? Narendra Modi, strong, able administrator. It's a myth, right? And you need to create myths. Society will invariably create myths around personalities, around events even sometimes, in order to create stories around them which resonate with the common man, right? So for the Dalit movement, Ambedkar was an enormously powerful figure in very real ways, not in a mythical way, in a very real ways, right? But often over a period of time, we end up flattening these people into myths, which reduces our engagement with their ideas, where we then engage with them simply as someone whom we worship. We don't now. He has now been reduced to an icon whom you worship, whom you garland, without necessarily engaging with his ideas, which is more important. So that is what we mean when you say that Ambedkar has been reduced to a myth. We are saying that we are ceasing to engage with him. We are ceasing to engage with his politics. We are making him a very depoliticized and a very unproblematic figure, which gives us an escape route. Right? That's what we mean when we say that we are making, we are reducing somebody to a myth. That's what we mean.
Just a quick point, just to add to this myth thing. I mean, we can debate about Jyotirao Phule's myths are so powerful. Bali Raja's myth, of course, is a counter myth. Anyway, we'll discuss that later. But in terms of Ambedkar stamps, coins, they have become icons now. They have become godlike figures. You just worship them. You don't really. So there's a process of folding into a myth, folding into a statue, a stamp, and that is the historical process. Because some intellectuals need to really fold somebody's ideas into a myth, into a statue. But our job is to really flow, make the icon flowing, statue flowing. How many dimensions are there? Why ungli? This is why one finger. How many ways you can really interpret this direction, the gesture of the finger, or holding constitution in his left arm. So all this is there. But sometimes, what has happened? So there are songs in Maharashtra. One of the leading singers, Sambhaji Bhagat, says, Baba Ambedkar, come out from the statue, come out from bhajan. Yeah. All that is happening. Is it the intellectual laziness of the people who require myth all the time? Or is there a good common sense that they can fight the myth? Yeah. Yes.
I mean, it's just fundamentally a question of dignity, right? I mean, human dignity, and it shouldn't matter who you are. And atrocity is unjustified. But when Waqf lands are being sold by religious heads, I mean, is it really an outside community that is harming the Muslims? When the President of India is willing to stand, absurdly, I mean, is she showing us the way? She's got elected because of that. I mean, I'm just curious whether within the community itself people, I mean, Rahul Gandhi goes and tries to save a Dalit girl and the parents turn and tell him, why have you shamed us? Do you understand your own dignity? Sorry to ask such a question.
It's to me.
Anybody.
The fact that everyone has dignity is not known by everyone. And society ensures that not everyone has a sense that they have dignity. And the entire struggle is for that to be universalized, for everyone to be able to feel that they have dignity. So yes, but the things you're pointing to are more symptoms. They are not in themselves cause for what you seem to suggest. They are, for example, let me shift it to the field of gender. The standard trope that is given there, where the oppressors of women are shown as being other women, the mother-in-law and so on. the fact that this occurs within a larger framework of patriarchy gets forgotten. So the point is that what you're saying is true. It seems very striking to us that how can an individual not have the sense of dignity that I have so effortlessly? That is the problem. The problem is that this effortless assumption that I have dignity is not available to everyone.
I'd like to add that Ambedkar, one of the quotes on Indian letters, he says, सभी मनुष्य एक ही मिट्टी के बने हुए और उन्हें ये अधिकार भी है कि वो अपने साथ अच्छे व्यवहार की मांग करें. So he says that everyone is made of same elements and they also have the right to demand a dignified treatment of themselves, right? So the fact that the fact that I have the right to demand dignified treatment is something that is being denied to us on a daily basis. I'm reminded of discussion on Burma, where they say that the people don't believe that they have the right to appeal against the state. So you have made a constitution, law, etc., but they don't believe that they have the right to go against the state. They believe that I can take Mr. Deshpande to court, somebody else to court, but I cannot take the state to the court, right? So because it is treated as a different order of being above approach. Now you say, what does it mean to have a judicial system where people don't even believe that they can take certain classes of people to court, right? So the question of dignity would, and which is why I think Ambedkar stressed education for all, saying that education would awaken this sense of dignity, perhaps, but yeah.
Give me half a minute, I'll just say. This Satish's point is important. The expression, effortless assumption that I have a dignity is a very important point, I think. You have to struggle to suggest that I also have dignity. Others don't have to struggle. And that comes to you naturally without making any efforts, because dignity itself is a natural good. It should come to you naturally. And that exactly was the point of Ambedkar when he was struggling in 1927 at Mahad. His point was, from where do you get your dignity? You develop the sense, attitude of comparison. And through this ability to compare, you get dignity. And he was making that dogs and cats can drink water from the tank, not human being. So you are lesser being. Comparison. So that self-worth actually is created. Effortless assumption begins from there. You compel to say that I also have dignity, manuski, as he said in Marathi. So I think the effortless assumption we have to acquire. And you are not allowed to do that because there's a master-slave relationship anyway.
So my question was, how do you think the postal system and telegram as a means of communication compares to more contemporary forms of communication that are more widespread in today's day and age in consolidating caste? So nowadays, for instance, most people communicate through social media, where communication is more filtered. The content that you see, the opportunity to see imagery around, say, Ambedkar or anyone else that, say, anyone would want, the state would want you to see is not generally available, right? Because your communication is more one-to-one based on your preferences, based on what algorithms set for you. So how do you think over time we've transitioned from, in terms of, just having access to this kind of discourse, this kind of symbolism in today's day and age, and what impact does that have?
Thank you for that question. It's a very important question, and in my opinion, it's probably the central question of our times right now. So what you're saying is absolutely true, that it seems to suggest that, I was actually thinking about this earlier, and the thing that used to strike me as an adolescent who would be embarrassed to receive postcards from relatives is because everyone could read them, right? But the point is that everyone couldn't read at that time. So that you needn't have worried about all, quote unquote, all sorts of people reading what you wrote on a postcard. So today, as you're saying, we have the struggle is between people who would like to have a completely curated world, a self-curated world, which magnifies and reflects their own prejudices to the point where they are no longer recognizable as prejudices, against another form of consciousness which insists that there is more to the world than what I like or dislike, that there may be other likes and dislikes that must be considered, and that our humanity consists of this togetherness, this sharing of a world where different people think differently. Now, who values what? And technology has now given us the means to, Donald Trump is your best example. In the most technologically and materially advanced country in the world, you have an entire sub-society or a cult that wants to just build its own world and live in its own world and feels that it's perfectly normal to do so. And we have, of course, we have that here, right? So it's your generation that will have to address this question, right? So where, whether algorithmically done or consciously done, curating your own world for yourself according to your comfort levels is what will take us forward as humanity, or in what ways do we acknowledge other people who might think differently, whose likes in the digital sense as well as in the more prosaic sense might be different from ours. So thank you for that question.
If I might just add slightly to that, it's what you also make a very good point in that obviously today's digital era of communication has taken taken communication to the next level, right? So when Vikas, for instance, spoke of the first time stamps came and the first times people started communicating, they knew that there were more people like them in the rest of the country. The Akhil Bharatiya would have more Kshatriyas, would have more Brahmins, and then they tried to consolidate, right? That process of consolidation has become enormously more easy, enormously more accessible now. But it also can have very good fallout in the sense that beyond my caste, I might also be able to very quickly and easily access other like-minded people whom I can then incorporate into my struggle. And therefore, there is also an equal possibility, I believe, for fraternity in this age, which is even higher, much higher than the possibilities that existed before the digital age. And I think that is something that is a positive and can be harvested positively.
I'll just add.
I think this morphing the image in the digital is to deal with the prejudice, actually. And you can do it as and when it is required. For example, somebody actually developed this Ambedkar statue in his own image. And there was a hue and cry. So that people are very sensitive. I think the ability to look at history as it has come to us in its own form and content has to be relooked at. For example, you just can't morph the image of the 1927 March Satyagraha. You can't morph that stamp. Or you can't morph this Bhima Korega's, monument there. So if you have to have that readiness, ethical readiness to look at that. And since you don't want to look at that, you have digital at your disposal to actually frame it in such a way that you forget history. So I think you are on the highway, but you require Pagdandi to approach reality, which is so complex.
So it's not the case that social media, on the one hand, social media has indeed intensified prejudices across the world, and the boundaries have become much thicker than earlier. But it's also true that social media can be an enabling platform as well. So the Bangalore International Center chose to put an Instagram post about this event. And because I do not know how to open Instagram, so I do not know what exactly happens inside. But they said, a lot of young people, access Instagram. And I guess that move of BIC has attracted many more youthful audience into this room. A. And B, I see that, in this social media, in this age of social media, I see some of these students around who, or youth, who are trying to ask questions in their localities, but they don't get answers, and then social media, they find that there's some conversation happening, let's go and, go there. So social media can be a space where people can actually create new solidarity, search for new questions, because most families, the moment you talk about caste or anything, they'll just say, can we have your dinner, please? No politics during dinner, something of that side. So now the students say, where do we go? Teachers don't want to talk about, parents don't talk about. So now they search online. In some cases, in most cases, perhaps they get material which reinforces prejudices, but occasionally they come across material which seems to open up possibilities, and which is why I see so many youthful, audience here, both in that room and here. So I'm still hopeful about the potential of social media, even though I'm not adept at using it. That's a different thing.
Thank
you. Hello, I'm Siddharth. And my question was regarding stamps basically being, let's talk in very, I would say, sort of modern terms, being data packets that are conveying information, bringing in social cohesion throughout the country. So what do you think immediately compares to postcards or stamps today in the digital domain, especially because a unit in the digital domain can contain much more data. It can contain an idea, it can contain information about that idea, and also what people think about that idea. So what do you think compares to that in today's digital world? Because being an artist myself, I often strive to add more meaning and information to what I create. So what do you think about that?
I think today the critical question is not so much of content, but of what is called forwarding, right? Content is universally available. Let me exaggerate, right? It's an exaggeration, but if you want content, you can get any kind of content today, right? In the digital world, from pornography to, anything, very serious philosophy, etc. Whatever is your opposite. The question is, what do you want to propagate? The point about media today, the social media and the digital world today, is the availability of content for propagation. And it's this term viral, going viral, is not about content. It's about people forwarding stuff, right? So we should, in my opinion, this is my opinion, we should be thinking about what makes people promote things, propagate things. Even when many things are available to me, but I choose to propagate this rather than that. That's the question we need to address. And how to make other things, things that we like, or we approve of, or we think are good for the world. How do we get people to propagate those rather than the ones that we think are bad for the world?
I think there are 2 points that we need to take into consideration. One is that, when you yourself are artist and you are naturally having a creative mind, so you keep adding meaning to your creation. Is there a closure to this creation, adding? Is there a closure to this adding? You just stop here because I have got enough adequate meaning out of it. Now I don't want to go any further as it is. The content is good enough for me to address my own question. Here, in digital forms, even Ambedkar's biography is digitalized now, digitized. The images are blurred than the images that are printed by government of Maharashtra. So what really attracts the people is not the blurred image, the digitized one, the one which is very, very perfect. So with all the features of the image very, very clear, sharply drawn. The image of Ambedkar, which is sharply drawn in the minds of the people, stays there, and they don't allow it to be diluted in any digital form. The point is this, not the form, the content is so important actually. For example, a stamp, Ambedkar, and behind Ambedkar there's Parliament. Now Ambedkar's imagination of Parliament was entirely different than the one we have today. We have, of course, a different building of the Parliament. So you have different problems. So I think the artist has to have that inner call to close, to bring a closure. Otherwise, you will go endlessly. Blurred image will not really affect people. You will be much ahead of the people who want to think with you.
So I'd like to come to your question from a different angle. So you spoke of the stamp as this, as a data point, right? Containing a lot of information, like a concentrated piece of, which concentrates inside it a lot of information. So for example, when he showed us that Jallianwala Bagh stamp, it's packed, no? It's just packed with so much in that little thing. So if I were to look for a contemporary digital equivalent of that, and I'm asking this to you as a question, would it be the meme, which packs so much information into it, and some of it is just fabulous? It is, only difference then would be the meme, or for instance, the reel, for example, which packs so much politics into it, packs so much comment into it. The only difference, of course, would be that this stamp is a state unit. It's got the state's sanction, whereas the whole genre of memes and reels has a certain sense of rebellion to it. It's not state. There is a certain undercurrent. It's subculture. Okay, so that is the difference. But in terms of just packing enormous amounts of signifiers into one kuti place, would, I think, be the meme in the digital world at any rate.
Because even I was coming to that conclusion. Maybe a meme is basically because the stamps were trying to serve a reality or like impetus of the people to do something, to convey an idea. So in today's time, when we have faster means of communication, what is that exactly?
Yeah.
Because I think the meme sort of has started to represent a social fact now. And there are a lot of sociological studies that are going into the creation of a meme.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's why that's what my conclusion was.
Yeah.
I wanted to reconfirm it.
Yeah, I feel that it is. It's that visual packed, sort of punch in the face, in the gut. I find it often being done by the meme.
I think the question is connected. My question or my context is connected to what has been said before here too. But I would just like to understand in the context where we are talking of a new digitalized revolution that is taking place. At the same time, we want to also not let philately or this the kind of data collection that has gone on here, it has made an impact. Certain stamps definitely have made an impact, especially the one that has been described as that Jallianwala Bagh massacre, the continuation of the images of the stamp changing over the years. And in the context of today's period, how the Jallianwala Bagh massacre is being portrayed through the stamp. Now, keeping the stamps as stamps and data as that data, what is the future? Because in the future philately, do you see any way of recovering that data and putting it into a conscious mode through the propagation of stamps itself? Like, say, for example, of course, digitally we cannot capture much of it, or maybe we can capture if we can capture the content of it. But at the same time, to capture the content and to put it into action, you need a certain consciousness. You need to be aware, you need to be conscious that you want to put across this data. Otherwise, that data will be lost. So this Jallianwala Bagh, I mean, my question is more related to if this content of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre through stamps is used as a means of getting to children, because again I feel that stamp collection has been an exclusive hobby. It has not been a common hobby. It has not been a common matter of as children. Today's children, it's even worse. But even in our times, stamp collection or going to philately was not considered very, hep or very much needed. So how to retain the fact that there's so much of work done on the stamps and there's so much of history in that, how to retain that? Can it be, will the government, will the state allow for any changes in curriculum, any changes in oral history, any changes in explaining this to the children through the usage of these stamps that are there? Otherwise, it will all just go down, after some time. And that richness will not be preserved. So how can the government get into this? I mean, they are portraying as tokenism, postal department, envelope cover, whatever. Every year, we have seen the progress also of how Ambedkar has grown larger or smaller or wider, whatever, according to the history, according to the pattern of that time. So how does one get government to take a stand or to bring it about in the curriculum through this exercise of the stamps itself, so that it doesn't get wasted?
See, there are two things here. Firstly, the kind of messages that the kind of purpose that the postage stamps were fulfilling earlier. Now, eventually, new modes of communication have replaced them. So that purpose is now being served by something else. That's one. Now, question about what can we do to this archive, and how can we engage the state in this? In my experience, it is best not to begin with the state, because that would be a kind of waste of time. It would be more important to build, in our own classes, teaching, or in say journalism, or in other fields, that we use this archive. And so, which is why I have started putting out the exhibition, because I want people. See, there are philatelic exhibitions every year in Bangalore, but the moment you say philatelic exhibition, so only philatelists go there. But now, I want to bring it to a general purpose audience and to public space, right? So that everybody believes that it is my archive. It is not the hobby horse of Mr. So-and-so, right? So I think it's important that we begin choosing it. And we, for instance, I use stamps a lot in my teaching. Vaishna, encourages a lot of use of stamps in telling stories about contemporary India. So we make these, we own this archive. It is state-produced archive in some sense, but we should begin owning up this archive. Now, once we own it up, then maybe the state also responds. But I've realized that in any intervention, if you begin with the state or try to depend primarily on the state, it's going to fail, because their political priorities change. And once the political priorities change, the entire project falls apart, and then people lose faith in it. And then after it falls apart, and you go to people, they say, well, it's a new tamasha. Right? So it's always good to begin independently. If the state wants to join, it's great. If it doesn't want to join, it's fine as well. So so then we begin. The state or NCERT, CBSE, or ICSE not stop us from using images in the classroom. Now, once sufficient number of people start using them, they may feel the need to incorporate it in the textbooks as well. If they feel that it is a very interesting way of teaching things, so they might include as well. But I'm not going to go and appeal to them to say, please include it. So that's not the way I think we should go.
Vikas has written a set of excellent articles in Frontline where he traces the history of the country, specific stages, using stamps. So just as he's done Caste here with stamps, he's done pieces, he's written these excellent pieces in Frontline where he's traced, for instance, how stamps moved away, how the government moved away from projects and state initiatives towards personalities, or how it dealt with historical personalities, or how it dealt with democracy or the electoral process. So I think he's kind of interacting with stamps in a very substantial and a very futuristic way.
Question, please.
No, in relation to this question, I think what the question you're asking, we need, and what, in a sense, Vikas is also insisting that we ask ourselves is, what is the work that stamps do? You know, in an ideological sense, in a social and cultural sense. Now, the work that stamp and associated with them, what is the work that they can do? What is the work that they should be doing or could do, right? And obviously, all of this changes along with context. And some of us here are in the generation where we remember stamps at a very intimate level. And in fact, my own that's the first thing I thought, how do we relate caste to stamps? And I was thinking about how I was taught, in fact, I was hit on the head at the back. I remember being hit many times, you are not supposed to lick a stamp because who knows what is there, So coming from an Orthodox Brahmin family, you're taught that stamps are not to be licked. And that's my first sense of how caste and stamps are linked, right? Whereas I saw others very happily being able to lick the stamps and so on and so on. So coming back to your point, I think we need to think about the different kinds of work that an object like a stamp can do in different contexts. And we have to think about it now in our context. To some extent, as Janaki said earlier, this is becoming, the past, and it's becoming the subject of nostalgia and so on. But nostalgia can have its uses as well, right? So we can also, make that do a certain kind of work. But until we start thinking in this way, we will treat stamps as a found object, which, as Vikas shows us very eloquently, they are not just found. I mean, they are made, and they are made through a process, and then they do a certain kind of work in a certain kind of context.
I'll just add one small point here. You see, every stamp designer wants a stamp to be popular. Every government wants the stamps it puts out to click with the people. So you see, even though somebody is designing the stamps sitting in closed doors, behind closed doors, he's already engaging in a dialogue with people. So in 1991, the dialogue that happened with the designer Ambedkar stamp is not the same as the dialogue that happened in 1966. 1991, he said, what will people like, and the Ambedkar statue would like. In 1991, they knew that, I cannot call Ambedkar controversial, extremist. I have to call him Baba Saheb. So this person who is not standing in election, who is not standing in poll, whose names most people do not know, but even this person, isolated person, is engaging in a conversation. Even if from position of strength, he's engaging in dialogue, conversation, and he wants that conversation to unfold in a particular way. But it may not unfold in that particular way. For instance, Professor Gopal Guru has argued that when in 1991, the Ambedkar coin came out, around the same time there was a Nehru coin as well. So Nehru coin was about 100 rupees and Ambedkar coin was 1 rupee. Now people interpreted this in a very interesting way. They said Ambedkar is in everybody's pocket, he is a people's leader, and Nehru is 100 rupees, it's not with everyone, he's a leader of elite, right? Now people are interpreting, so when the coin designer may not have thought of this, when he had his dialogue, he didn't think of this. But when people had their dialogues, they turned it around. And they said Ambedkar on 1 rupee means he's a man of masses of the small, poor people, right? So these stamps for me are not objects, but there are just sites of intense conversations. And which is why I spend time to see, what kind of dialogues emerge around them. So that's much more important. Though I haven't been able to do so much in the exhibition because I had to cover a very long period. But in the earlier Ambedkar exhibition, I did try to bring out some of these dialogues. Okay, anything else in the room?
Thank you for the discussion. So when we look at the exhibition there, so we see that many of the anti-caste leaders have come in the postcards. So we see Baba Khalge is there, then Karbu Thakur is there, Bibi Mandal is there, Baba Sahib is there, and then many more. But one thing struck me, or maybe it's a kind of a surprise which I found there, there is a complete absence of Manwa Kashiram. So we know Kashiram has a, very significant socio-political, contribution to the Indian landscape. And when I find his absence there, so my curiosity is it something like his postcards haven't been issued, or is it something that you didn't come across it? What is the, thing behind that? Thank you.
Yes, it's not working. It's not working. Yes. So, this is a point we discussed yesterday as well. See, there's been no stamp on Kashiram. There's one special cover which I somehow couldn't include here, but it is there with me. See, issue of stamp is a complex process. You have to, either the state or non-state makes a proposal, right? And the proposal goes to the Philatelic Advisory Committee, and Philatelic Advisory Committee then looks into it and then decides whether it is to issue a stamp or not. If the stamp is not issued, you could still go to the state CPMG, Chief Postmaster General, and make a proposal for a special cover, and then in most cases special covers are approved. Now, the community of followers of Kashiram, it seems they didn't make the proposal, and nobody in power thought it fit to on their own issue the stamp, right? So because stamps can be ordered by the state as well. It is not the case that Kashiram's movement did not have philatelic impact. It did have an impact, and I'll give you two very powerful examples. After Mayawati came to power in 2007 with the complete majority of our own, you see a different portrayal. The portrayal of Ambedkar changes on special covers from Uttar Pradesh. So to give you an example, a special cover released on the Round Table Conference in 2007, I think, or 2007, it did not show Ambedkar. So the image was cropped just that Ambedkar was in part. So only Gandhi, Malviji, and etc. were there. But in 2013, when they issued it again, so Ambedkar was in the same photo was resized, and you have Ambedkar in the frame. So and a lot of stamps on special covers on Ambedkar appear from the Uttar Pradesh circle after Mayawati came to power. It is not because she took interest in it. It is not because the Bahujan Samaj Party took interest in it. This is because now the special cover generating community, it can no longer ignore the social, because they are in a part of dialogue. When they are discussing, they are part of a dialogue. When they are designing, so they cannot ignore Ambedkar, right? And so therefore it changes there. A very important thing independent of the state was that a lot of collectors aim to collect everything, or at least one thing of everything. So Ambedkar now appears on a stamp. So if you want to be a collector, you have to have Ambedkar. You cannot have an incomplete series, Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is that once you have it in the official issues, you are supposed to, most collectors want to put, they want to show that they have a knowledge about the stamp. So when they go to official philatelic exhibitions, they have to describe the stamp and its background. So people who may not otherwise be engaged with Ambedkar thought, but for the philatelic exhibition, because the jury will come and ask questions, so you won't believe they do intense research. They would collect enormous amount of archival material to prepare for the questions of the jury. So a lot of these stamp collectors have enormous collections on non-philatelic collections just to be able to understand the context of it, right? So therefore, a lot. Now we need to see. So when they organize the philatelic exhibition and then issue special covers, they took note of the changed political environment where you have to take certain questions head on, right? And so therefore, the conscious movement had a philatelic impact, though he himself has not featured on stamps. Okay, fine. So thanks a lot, everyone. And I'd also like to thank Professor Deshpande, Professor Gopal Guru, and Vaishna Roy for coming all the way from different places to be part of this.